I remember the first time I saw Claire, a spring day during high school. Her fiery red hair and striking green eyes immediately captured my attention. Little did I know that moment would spark a connection lasting decades. We became inseparable, navigating the highs and lows of teenage life together, school dances, summer jobs, and everything in between. As we grew older, our bond only deepened. Despite the challenges of young love, our relationship thrived, unshakable in its foundation. Claire's determination and fiery personality captivated me. By the time we were 16, our friendship had grown into something more profound. We shared dreams, fears, and aspirations, creating a partnership rooted in mutual trust and respect. By graduation, we were already planning a life together. Over the past 3 months, especially the last, Claire had seemed distant, avoiding our usual study sessions and routines. Last night's argument left me drained. Known for her fierce temper and the grudges she could hold, Claire had always been headstrong. She was born Claire O'Hara but now goes by Claire Owens. She never tolerated nicknames. Early in our relationship, I tried calling her Cece, but she quickly shut it down. I'm Niels Ownes, her husband. We've been together since high school, dating from 16 and married for 22 years out of the 26 we've been a couple. Claire's temper could be explosive, but I'd long since learned to steer clear when she was in one of her moods. She declared early on in our relationship that she wanted to be a maid of honor at her own wedding, and I respected that. I've always admired her confidence. This morning, as she said for what felt like the 1000th time, "I like the way you do it," something about it unsettled me. It was different. Later, I got up to shower, my thoughts racing. Her words, though familiar, weighed heavily on my mind. The strain in our relationship had grown recently, more than I understood. Her usual moods rarely lasted longer than 10 days, but this had been dragging on for weeks. I finished my shower and told her it was her turn. She groaned but got up and headed to the bathroom. Early in our marriage, we couldn't get enough of each other. Even during our jobs, mine as a mechanic, hers at a department store, our connection felt unbreakable. Those were our early days, full of love and scraping by financially. I worked as a mechanic until I was 28 when a local auto shop owner offered me a management position. He appreciated my knowledge of cars and my knack for working with people. Over dinner one night, he laid out a plan. I'd earn the same $40,000 annually for 10 years while he saved $20,000 yearly for a down payment to eventually sell me the franchise. We shook on it, and I gave my 2 weeks' notice. This job brought flexibility, allowing me to attend my kids' sports games, though it meant working evenings and weekends. When I told Claire about the opportunity, she was livid I hadn't consulted her first, especially since there was no formal contract. I explained the long-term benefits for our family, but she wouldn't hear it and ignored me for a week. I hoped the plan would work out despite fearing her reaction if it didn't. Her temper had overshadowed many moments, camping trips, birthdays, and even vacations. Years later, the franchise expanded to 4 locations, thriving with steady growth. Claire, always hardworking, returned to managing an insurance office after our kids were born. I knew the stress of her job might explain her worsening attitude over the years. About 2 years ago, things shifted noticeably. Her temper flared more often, and she began belittling me in ways that hurt deeply. These past 3 months had been especially tense. Attempts to address the issues briefly helped but always led to bigger fights. Her moods affected everything, leaving me dreading time at home. By Friday, after another rough week, Claire came home late, demanding intimacy. I snapped, telling her I wasn't at her beck and call. Frustrated, I spent the night in my son Mason's room. While grabbing clothes, I saw a text on her phone from someone named CB asking, "So, did he do it?" My stomach dropped. Her comment earlier, "I like the way you do it," echoed in my head, now laced with suspicion. Has she been comparing me to someone else? I felt sick. When Claire asked if I was okay, I told her I felt nauseous and needed space, avoiding her touch. I drove to the store, claiming I needed something for my stomach. As I drove, my thoughts spiraled, piecing together subtle changes in her behavior over the past months. Could she have been unfaithful? We'd always trusted each other's privacy, never needing passwords for phones or computers. But now, doubt clouded everything. After circling the neighborhood aimlessly, I eventually stopped at the grocery store, picking up stomach medicine. When I returned home, I took some Pepto and NyQuil before heading straight to my son Mason's room. Claire came in and asked, "Are you feeling any better?" I mumbled something, got undressed, and climbed into bed. She touched my forehead, saying, "You're not running a fever." My mind raced with thoughts of betrayal. How could she do this to us? She offered to make chicken noodle soup, but I refused, claiming I'd just throw it up. I didn't trust her and wanted her gone. "I'm going to bed. I'll feel better after some sleep," I said. "Okay, I'll check on you later," she replied as she left the room. Sleep was the furthest thing from my mind. Memories of our life together flooded in: meeting, marriage, kids, vacations, graduations. I couldn't pinpoint anything to validate my suspicions, but I needed proof. Lying there, I began forming a plan. If she had cheated, I knew I could never forgive her. Getting up to use the bathroom, I noticed her phone on the nightstand. A message from CB caught my eye. I made a reservation for Wednesday afternoon. A hotel reservation? My gut churned as I decided I'd take Wednesday afternoon off to follow her. Pretending to be sick for the next few days, I minimized our interactions. We still shared a bed, but there was no intimacy. It's astonishing how quickly love can transform into revulsion. On Wednesday, I left work during lunch and drove to her office. I parked discreetly, eating a small snack while my stomach twisted with anxiety. For an hour and a half, I waited, second-guessing myself. Maybe it was just an innocent message. Around 2:30, her boss left alone, making me doubt further. But 15 minutes later, Claire walked out of the building and drove to a motel. She parked beside her boss's car, and I parked out of sight, watching her greet him, "Edward." They walked into a room together. My heart sank. I took a picture of the door closing behind them, my worst fears confirmed. I drove home, seething with anger. Mason was at baseball practice, giving me time to think. Our house, located on the edge of town, was chosen for the space to build a 2-car garage with a finished room upstairs. My man cave had everything: a hoist for working on cars, tools, and even a bed for when I was in the doghouse. I moved my clothes and toiletries there, preparing for what was coming. When Claire arrived home around 5:30, I was watching TV, ignoring her. She asked about Mason, and I replied curtly that he was likely out with friends. She then suggested we spend the evening together, hinting at wanting something from me. Playing along, I agreed. As she emerged from the bathroom, I saw her not as the woman I'd married, but as the 42-year-old stranger she'd become. To cope, I closed my eyes, trying to imagine anything else. Opening the nightstand drawer, I started rummaging. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Getting protection," I replied calmly, making it clear I didn't trust her. She exploded, accusing me of being a failure for not asking for a raise in 8 years. "I've lost all respect for you," she yelled. I got dressed and left for the garage. From there, I heard her screaming for me to come down and face her. Anticipating her temper, I called the police. Her rage escalated as she pounded on the garage door, shouting obscenities. Then, it went eerily quiet. A moment later, I smelled something burning. Looking out the window, I saw my garage engulfed in flames, with Claire standing outside, grinning. I escaped through a side window, twisting my ankle as I jumped. Crawling to safety, I could hear her hurling insults until the police arrived. One officer called for the fire department while another restrained and handcuffed her. She screamed, "Take it away, you idiots! Burn his precious doghouse to the ground." At the station, I gave my statement while Claire was charged with arson and possibly attempted murder. The officer suggested I contact a lawyer about a restraining order. That night, I called my attorney, who referred me to a criminal defense specialist. The next day, I filed for a restraining order preventing Claire from coming within 500 feet of me, my workplace, or our home. Claire remained in jail until her arraignment. I told Mason and my daughter, Megan, what had happened. Megan wasn't surprised, having seen her mom's anger firsthand. She hugged me, offering quiet support. Mason, however, was furious but assured me he'd eventually come to terms with it. Over the weekend, I dealt with the wreckage of the garage. Some tools were salvageable, but my diagnostic equipment was ruined. Insurance coverage was uncertain since Claire co-owned the property. Reflecting on our life, I realized our trust was irreparably broken. I began researching Edward Burgess online, hoping to understand how this had started. Hired 2 years ago as a general manager at Claire's office, his arrival coincided with her change in behavior. Divorced with 3 kids, he lived an hour away. I planned to reach out to Claire's boss on Monday, a man I knew from company events and from servicing his car at my shop. Sunday night, Claire called. "I'm sorry for setting the garage on fire," she said. "So what?" I replied curtly. "Does that mean I can come home now?" she asked. "No. I've filed a restraining order," I said. "Mom and Dad bailed me out," she added with frustration. "I'm not thrilled," I retorted. "Neither am I." "Can we talk and work this out?" she asked, her tone softening. "No, Claire. There's nothing left to work out. Niels, you know I love you." "It's just my temper," she pleaded. "No, I don't know if you love me." "If you did, you wouldn't have slept with your boss," I countered. "That's not true," she snapped defensively. "What's not true?" "That I don't know if you love me, or that you're sleeping with him," I demanded. "Both," she replied. "Claire, I saw you with him at the motel." "Don't deny it," I said. She gasped audibly. "Why?" I asked, pressing her for answers. "It was a mistake, a one-time thing," she claimed. "Nonsense, Claire. I'm tired of your lies," I said before hanging up and shutting off my phone. About half an hour later, her father, Mr. O'Hara, who had always been like a second dad to me, knocked on my door. His face reflected confusion. "What did she tell you?" I asked. "That you two had a fight and you kicked her out," he replied. "How did she explain being in jail?" I questioned. "She said she was burning your car manuals in the garage, and it got out of hand," he answered. Shaking my head, I told him, "You need to get the truth from her." "Are you going to tell me what happened?" he asked. "I don't think you want to hear it, Mr. O'Hara," I replied. "Why the formalities?" "You know I consider you my son," he said. "Because soon, we won't have that relationship." "You'll probably hate me," I explained. "Is it really that bad?" he asked hesitantly. I nodded, and he seemed to understand. No father wants to imagine his daughter doing such things. Later, I received a text from him, "I'm sorry." Claire must have confessed. I suspected their home was filled with heated arguments that night. The next day, I called her boss. "Niels, how are you?" he asked, recognizing my name. "I'm sorry, sir, but this isn't a pleasant call," I began. "Oh," he said, waiting. "Claire and I are getting a divorce because she's been having an affair with Edward Burgess," I explained. "Oh, no," he replied, sounding regretful. I knew I should have trusted my instincts. I should have looked into Edward more carefully. "This isn't your fault. They're both adults," I reassured him. "Niels, give me until the end of the week. I can't change what happened, but I can address this," he offered. "Sir, if you fire Claire, it will hurt me financially during the divorce." "I'd appreciate it if you kept her employed," I requested. "She's always been a great employee, so yes, I'll keep her," he agreed. I thanked him, knowing he was a good man. The divorce papers were served to Claire discreetly at work. She called me immediately, starting with, "You goddamn prick." I hung up. Being a mechanic, I knew how to dismantle a car without leaving a trace. Edward's Lexus was about to need a new engine. By Friday, Edward's car broke down, making him late to work. Shortly after, he was fired for unbecoming behavior. Claire called again, furious. "What did you do?" she demanded. "What are you talking about?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "You know exactly what I mean," she snapped. "Claire, talk to our lawyers." "Don't call me again," I said, hanging up. My revenge wasn't over. I contacted Edward's ex-wife, Ruth, and explained my situation. She was more than willing to help. On Saturday, I made dinner reservations at Claire's favorite restaurant and invited Mason and Megan. I wanted Claire, and by extension Edward, to find out. The three of us arrived before Ruth. When she joined us, I introduced her to my kids. "This is Ruth, Edward Burgess's ex-wife," I explained. Ruth shared her story, recounting how Edward's infidelity led to their divorce. She forgave him once, but when he cheated again, she ended it. Trust is the foundation of any relationship. Without it, there's nothing, she said. By the end of dinner, we were openly discussing everything. Megan admitted she'd suspected something was wrong for over a year. After dinner, Megan asked if I was heading home. "I'm asking Ruth to dance," I said with a smile. Ruth accepted, and we danced until 11 p.m. afterward. I drove her to her hotel but declined her invitation to come up, feeling it was too soon. The next morning, we had breakfast together, which caught the attention of the waitress. Gossip about us would undoubtedly reach Claire. Claire did find out and called, accusing me of seeing other women. "Claire, we're getting a divorce. Nothing you do will stop it," I told her firmly. She finally signed the papers after a conversation with her father. At Megan's graduation, I saw Claire for the first time since our split. She looked older and thinner. "Are you still seeing Edward's ex?" she asked bitterly. "Ruth is amazing," I replied. "Where's Edward?" I asked in return. "He got fired and moved out of state," she admitted. "You didn't love me enough," I said, walking away as she broke down in tears. The open house to sell our home was scheduled for the following Saturday. Despite the pending divorce, we agreed to host it together. I temporarily lifted the restraining order to allow Claire access. Seeing her in familiar settings was painful, a stark reminder of what we'd lost. As I took out the trash, Claire approached. "Thank you for letting me help with this," she said quietly. "You'll always be their mother," I replied, continuing with my task. "Niels, can you look at me?" she asked. I stopped and looked at her. "I'm sorry for what I did to us," she said, her voice breaking. For the first time, she apologized for the affair. "Why did you do it?" I asked. She cried and ran out of the room, unable to answer. Months passed, and the divorce was finalized. Last year, Megan received her college acceptance letter, and Mason opened his auto repair shop. We sold the house, splitting the small equity left after taking a second mortgage to pay for tuition and start Mason's business. Claire pleaded guilty to arson, receiving 2 years probation, anger management classes, and therapy. When the divorce was finalized, Claire asked to meet for dinner. Nervous but looking healthier, she apologized again. "I lost respect for you, Niels. Edward seemed ambitious, and I saw you as stagnant. But now I understand the sacrifices you made for our family. I'm so sorry for what I did." "Thank you," I said to Claire during our dinner, "and I'm sorry I didn't live up to your expectations." We parted with a hug, and she offered to be there if I ever needed someone to talk to. While I appreciated the gesture, I doubted I'd take her up on it. On the way home, I called Ruth. "Are you still available?" I asked. "I'm available," she replied. "When can we meet?" I inquired. "Your place or mine?" she asked. "Yours," I replied. We had a fantastic dinner at her house. Wanting to be honest, I told her, "Ruth, I really like you. I'm not sure where this is going, but I need you to know my reasons. First, you're an amazing woman. Second, I want revenge. You're the first person I've been with since my wife cheated on me, and I don't want you to feel used. I respect you." Ruth smiled and replied, "I've realized I want you too. Part of me wants revenge as well. I never got back at Edward for the other women he cheated with. Let's even the score." With that, we headed to the bedroom. An hour later, I lay there thinking about Claire and the early days of our relationship. Even then, I'd noticed her bad temper, which worsened over the years. When she lashed out, sometimes verbally, sometimes physically, I'd retreat to the garage, avoiding confrontation. Looking back, I realized this probably made her see me as weak, further fueling her disrespect. But when she set the garage on fire with me inside, I knew it had gone too far. I couldn't continue to live like that, fearing for my safety. The betrayal and shattered trust left no other option but to end our marriage. Lying next to Ruth, I thought about the nature of our connection. She was wonderful, but we couldn't build a meaningful relationship on shared animosity. Still, we could enjoy what we have for now. "You're amazing, Ruth. You knew exactly what I needed," I said. She laughed. "You're an incredible lover. I can't believe your ex looked elsewhere. I hope we can keep this friends with benefits thing going," I said. She smiled. "So do I, but I'm not ready for anything serious yet," I added. "That works for me." "Oh, and let's make sure your ex finds out about us." "I'll do the same," she said slyly. "Sounds perfect," I replied with a smirk. Later that evening, I texted Claire, "Call me when you have time. Monday works. Nothing urgent." She called within minutes. "Are you taking me up on my offer?" she asked. "No, I'm exhausted." "Ruth is very energetic," I replied. Silence followed before I heard her counting to 10. A sign her anger management classes had partially worked. I didn't call you. I texted. You could have waited until Monday, she snapped. I'm sorry, she added, trying to recover. I wanted to discuss Megan's plans. Any vacations I should know about? I asked. I'll talk to her and get back to you, she said curtly. Okay, just let me know, I said casually, hoping to sting her with my indifference. A week later, Edward showed up at my door. I called 911 and opened the door cautiously. He burst in, yelling, "Stay away from my wife." You mean your ex-wife? She kicked you out for cheating, I replied calmly. Stay away from Ruth, he barked. Why should I? She's amazing, I taunted. Edward lost his temper, swinging wildly at me. I deflected his first punch but let the second one land, enough to justify self-defense. By the time the cops arrived, we were both bruised, but he was worse off. The officers separated us, realized I had called them, and put Edward in the patrol car. After cleaning up, I called Ruth to let her know what had happened. I know, she said. He had the nerve to ask me to bail him out. Are you okay? Just a bit bruised, but he got the worst of it, I replied. I'll be right over to play nurse, she said and hung up. An hour later, she was at my place, taking care of me. I was grateful for the company and for working a late shift the next day, giving me time to recover. Before leaving, Ruth kissed me and said, I hope this continues. Your touch is magical. While flattered, I knew we'd need a serious conversation about our future soon. The next day at work, Claire called. What did you do? She demanded. Well, hello to you too, I said. Yeah, hi. What did you do? She pressed. What are you talking about? I played dumb. You had Edward arrested, she accused. No, he arrested himself, I replied. That's not what he said, she countered. Oh, so you're taking his word over mine? Sounds about right, I said sarcastically. He's not my lover anymore. That ended over a month ago, she insisted. Say you, I teased. Why are you such a jerk? She snapped. I guess I had a good teacher, I replied. Are you going to drop the charges? She pleaded. Why would I? He broke into my place and attacked me, I explained. Because I'm asking you to, she said. You're not my wife anymore. I don't have to do what you say, I stated before hanging up. Edward was later charged with assault and battery and would likely spend 90 days in jail, losing his job. I couldn't help but smile when I heard that. That Thursday, I ended up at Smitty's, the bar Claire and I used to frequent. Sometimes, familiar places can bring clarity. While sipping a beer at a small table, I heard a familiar laugh. Claire was there with her office friends. She spotted me but quickly led her group to a table far from mine. After about 10 minutes, 2 women from her group headed to the restroom. One stopped at my table. You're Claire's ex, right? She asked with a twinkle in her eye. I nodded. I've heard a lot about you, she said, smirking. I wasn't sure what she'd heard, but I doubted it was flattering. On their way back, both women stopped to flirt with me. One was about 10 years younger than me, the other 15. Unlike men, these women didn't seem to mind flirting with a friend's ex. I flirted back, thinking it might annoy Claire. As they left, one slipped me her business card. Isabella Estrada. I glanced at Claire and saw sadness flash across her face, quickly replaced by her usual fury. I reflected on my past with her. I still loved her, but living with her had been like living with a volcano, always on edge, waiting for the next eruption. If she hadn't cheated, I might have stayed, but was I better off now? I didn't know. Saturday morning, I dialed Isabella's number. Hello, she answered. Hi, Isabella. This is Niels Ownes. We met at Smitty's on Thursday, I said. Yes, I remember, the handsome man sitting alone, she teased. I blushed. I was just unwinding and thinking, I admitted. Would you like to talk about it? She asked. Yeah, I think I would, I replied. How about tonight? She suggested. Sure, Smitty's at 7:30? I proposed. I'll be there, she said warmly. I felt nervous. What could a younger woman possibly see in me? I hadn't dated in over 25 years. Dressing in business casual, I wanted to make an effort. When Isabella and I met, we hit it off right away. She was engaging, charming, and wonderful to look at. Once I felt comfortable, I decided to ask what had been on my mind. You work with my ex, so you've probably heard bad things about me. Why would you want to date me? I asked. Before she got involved with Edward, she used to talk about you in a way that intrigued me. She seemed genuinely impressed by you, Isabella explained. Later, when she and Edward were socializing at work events, I started noticing changes. From what I gathered, the affair likely began about 3 months before you served her with divorce papers, she added. Her timeline matched what I'd noticed about Claire's shifting attitude. Isabella continued, during bachelorette parties, your ex actually talked about how satisfied she was with you. She paused, her gaze intense. So naturally, I'm curious. I blushed, never expecting Claire to discuss me like that. Isabella smiled, don't be embarrassed. If you're as good as she said, this is going to be fun. We finished our food and drinks, and when the waitress brought the check, she handed me a receipt with a smile, saying, keep this, you might win something. Her cryptic wink left me puzzled, but I slipped the check into my pocket. As we walked out, Isabella took my hand. Now for dessert, she said softly. Surprised but intrigued, I replied, your place or mine? I'd rather go to your place. You can tell a lot about someone by how they live, she said. She hopped into my truck, meaning I'd need to drive her back later for her car. When we arrived at my house, we headed straight for the bedroom. By the time we fell asleep, it was nearly 10 a.m. The next day, we had lunch before I dropped her off at home. Isabella made me promise to call her again, and I assured her I would. On my way home, I found the receipt from Smitty in my wallet. Written on it was the waitress Kate's name and number. This new reality, women showing interest in me, would take some getting used to. Monday after work, I went back to Smitty's and found Kate there. She was closer to my age, and we struck up a conversation. I asked her out, and since weekends were busy for her, we planned a Wednesday date, her day off. As I walked to my truck, my phone rang. A woman's voice said, hello, Niels, it's Grace. We met last Thursday night at Smitty with Isabella. Oh yes, I remember you, I said. Isabella told me she had a great time with you on Saturday. I was wondering if we could go out sometime, she suggested. Aren't I a bit old for you? I asked. Not at all. I prefer older guys, they're more mature and easier to get along with, she replied. We agreed to meet that Saturday, and Grace proved to be a very enthusiastic companion. My Wednesday date with Kate went just as well. Like Isabella and Ruth before her, she said, I like the way you do it. On Sunday, Ruth invited me to dinner, and after an amazing meal, we spent the evening together. I was beginning to enjoy single life. On Monday night, Claire called. What the hell do you think you're doing? She demanded. Sitting here watching TV, I replied, feigning innocence. No, I mean you, a 40-year-old man dating women 10 and 15 years younger. Don't you have any remorse? She asked. You must be talking about Isabella and Grace, I said. Yes, of course, she confirmed. They both asked me out. Dating has changed. I like not having to ask a woman out and face rejection. It's nice to feel wanted, I explained. Well, stop dating people I work with, she snapped. Why would I do that? I asked. Because I said so, she replied. We're not married anymore. I'll date whoever I choose, I asserted. You're doing this just to make my life harder, she accused. No, but if it does, that's a bonus, I teased. How does dating them affect you? They whisper behind my back. They say, I can't believe she let him go. It's humiliating, she admitted. I'll ask them to keep things private if that helps, I offered. No, just stop seeing them, she demanded. That's not going to happen unless they want to end it, I said firmly. You're an a-hole, she said, hanging up. I smiled, thinking about the women I'd met. They did wonders for my confidence. By Thursday night, Claire called again, this time about Kate. She's more age-appropriate, I thought aloud before answering. Now what? I asked. The waitress at Smitty? Really, she said. I thought you didn't want me dating younger women, I replied. I don't want you dating at all. I'm constantly answering questions about why I let you go, she fumed. Tell them I wasn't right for you or that you found someone more compatible, I suggested. After a pause, she muttered, I'll just tell them I was stupid, and hung up. Sitting back, I reflected on our life together. We had good times, but things began unraveling when Edward was hired. Maybe the affair started sooner than I realized. Now, Claire seemed remorseful. Part of me felt vindicated that she regretted her choices, but another part wished things could have worked out. That night, Isabella called. "What's up?" she asked. "Just bought a case of beer to drown my sorrows," I replied. "Can I help with that?" she offered. "You might be just what the doctor ordered," I said. Over the next year, my list of friends with benefits grew. Isabella, Grace, Ruth, and Kate all enjoyed their time with me, and I didn't turn any of them down. Each woman became a unique and pleasurable adventure. Claire eventually got used to hearing about me with different women. One day at Smitty's, she asked me out. We were good together. "Why not for old time's sake?" she suggested. "I can't," I said. "When we were together, everything I did was out of love. Now, it would just be out of convenience." "I understand," she said sadly and returned to her table. Finally, the day came when I was awarded the AutoPro Supply franchise. The owner kept his word, and I was able to buy it out on generous terms, setting me up for a prosperous future. I had to take out a loan to secure the AutoPro Supply franchise, but business was thriving, and I wasn't worried about repaying it. Originally, I'd pursued this deal for financial stability for Claire and me. Now, it was just for me. That evening, I called Claire and invited her to dinner. She agreed, so I made reservations at the finest restaurant in town and arranged for a car to pick her up. I told her to dress elegantly. When she arrived, she looked stunning in a long black dress that beautifully complemented her red hair and green eyes. For a moment, I remembered why I had fallen for her. "You look amazing, Claire," I said. "Thank you. You look very handsome in that tuxedo." "What's the occasion?" she asked. "I'm celebrating, and I wanted you to be the first to know," I replied. "Now I'm curious," she said with a smile. "Let's enjoy the meal first," I suggested. As we ate, the conversation grew more meaningful. Finally, she leaned forward and asked, "What are we celebrating?" "Claire, after we married, I worked as a mechanic. You seemed content, but I always felt stuck. When I told you about the job at AutoPro Supply for a more flexible schedule, you were furious," I explained. "I remember," she said softly, lowering her gaze. "I did it for us, for our family. It was all to make our lives better," I continued. "And I ruined it all," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't bring you here to relive bad memories," I said gently. "Today, I signed the paperwork to buy a AutoPro Supply franchise with 4 stores." She looked stunned. "This will ensure that our children will have a strong inheritance. They can either run the franchise or sell it. Our grandchildren will benefit too," I added. "I can't tell you how happy that makes me." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I listened to Edward when he called you a failure with no ambition. I lost faith in you, and I ruined everything. You were a great husband, father, and lover, and I threw it all away. I'm so sorry, Niels. I hope you believe me. I'm sorry for everything I did that got us here," she said, her voice trembling. She stood abruptly, tears streaming, and headed for the restroom. A server followed her in. I hadn't expected my news to affect her so deeply. Tonight was meant to celebrate future wealth for our children and grandchildren, not to reopen old wounds. I signaled the server for the check, knowing she wouldn't want to continue the evening. When she returned, I stood and said, "I've already paid the bill. Let me take you home." "Thank you." "I'm sorry I ruined your evening," she said, her eyes still wet with tears. She cried quietly during the ride home. I wanted to hug her, but I didn't want to send the wrong message. At her apartment door, she hesitated, looking at me as if inviting me in. "I'm sorry, Claire, but we can't go back there," I said. She nodded, then closed the door. The next couple of years were busy with business and meeting new people. Word of mouth turned out to be the best advertising, and I always practiced safety. Claire and I occasionally spoke, mostly about our kids. Mason got engaged to Fiona Watts, a sweet woman he met at his store. On the day of their engagement party, I arrived early to help Mason set up. We rented a room at the Sheraton and brought in sandwiches from Subway. As we were finishing, Claire arrived. She still looked good after all these years. "We never had an engagement party, Niels," she said. "No, but everyone we knew us," I replied. Do you remember proposing to me? She asked. Yes, I do, I said, feeling a twinge of old emotion. Sometimes, I wanted to hurt you because you hurt me so much, she said quietly. I said I was sorry. Can't we move on? It's been 3 years, she pleaded. Today is about Mason and Fiona. Let's just be cordial, I said firmly. Maybe we could be cordial from now on, she added in her usual demanding tone. As the guests arrived, Mason and Fiona greeted everyone. About 45 minutes into the party, I heard Fiona call out, "Mom." I turned to see a beautiful woman in a floral sundress. She had blonde hair, deep blue eyes, and a smile that made my heart skip a beat. That's Fiona's mom, Allison. She's very religious and not into your lifestyle, Mason said quietly. Mason, before your mother left, I was a one-woman man. I want someone I can trust again, I replied. I don't know if she'd give you a chance, but I'll introduce you, he offered. That would be great, I said. Mason led me to Fiona and her mother. Mrs. Watts, this is my father, Niels, he said. You can call me Mom now, Allison said warmly. Claire approached and interjected, as long as he doesn't forget who his real mother is. Mason introduced Claire to Allison, and they hugged, quickly starting a conversation. I walked away, wanting my first impression with Allison to be on my terms. I mingled with friends and family, many of the men joking about all the women I knew. Some women were standoffish, while others were friendly. While talking to a divorced woman named Beth, Claire approached. You better be careful with him. You never know what you might pick up, she said sharply. Angry, I replied, don't mind her, she's just mad I'm not giving her any attention. Niels, you're a creep, Claire shot back. You're the one interfering. Let's just keep our distance, I said before turning to Beth. Want to take a walk and talk privately? I asked, mostly to irritate Claire. 2 hours into the party, I finally introduced myself to Allison. So, you're the infamous Niels, she said with a slight edge. I don't know what you've heard, but yes, I'm Mason's father, I replied. Mason seems like a fine young man. I hope he doesn't offend my Fiona, she said pointedly. He's hardworking and loves Fiona deeply. He'll do right by her, I assured her. Well, I hope he stays faithful, she added bluntly. He will. You have nothing to worry about, I replied confidently. It'll be a church wedding, she said. Promises made before God and family, I said. Look, I know you've heard things about me. Let's talk and clear the air. I think that's a good idea, but not here, she said. Pick a time and place, and I'll be there, I offered. Tomorrow after church. We'll go to Cracker Barrel, she suggested, giving me the details. For the rest of the party, Allison and I exchanged subtle glances, the connection between us unspoken but palpable. I remained a mystery to most at the engagement party as it wound down. Claire approached me with her usual mix of curiosity and critique. Fiona's lovely, but they're moving fast. Did you know they plan to marry within a year? She asked. Mason's smart. He knows what he wants. Meeting and marrying quickly can create challenges, but we knew each other for years and still divorced. It's their commitment that will determine their success. And I think they're committed, I replied. Claire looked regretful, clearly reminded of how she had broken her commitment to our marriage. It still hurt, but I needed her to remember that. Sunday morning, I woke early, shaved, showered, and dressed in a sharp suit. I drove to Allison's church, feeling both curious and nervous. The sanctuary was vastly different from the Catholic churches I grew up attending, no stained glass, candles, or pulpit. Instead, there was a simple raised platform with a plain cross. I felt overdressed in my suit as others arrived casually in jeans and coffee cups in hand, but the friendly greetings helped me feel welcome. I kept scanning for Allison, wondering if I'd misunderstood the details or if she was unwell. Then, as the service began, I saw her singing with the praise band. Her voice was beautiful, and when she noticed me during the third song, she smiled warmly. After singing, Allison came to sit next to me, and I felt relieved. I didn't expect you to come to the service, she said. I feel a little out of place, overdressed for the occasion, I admitted. That's okay. You can take off your jacket if it helps, she suggested. I removed my jacket and laid it on the bench. Thank you for sitting with me, I said. You're my guest. Of course, I would, she replied. The service was unlike anything I was used to, relaxed and pleasant. Afterward, Allison introduced me to the minister and several others as Fiona's future father-in-law. At Cracker Barrel, we started with small talk, but as we finished eating, Allison's tone shifted. "So, Niels, I've heard some things about you. People say you're a womanizer and sleep around. What do you have to say about that?" she asked bluntly. "What's your definition of a womanizer?" I replied calmly. "A guy who chases women, sleeps with them, and dumps them," she answered. "By that definition, I'm not a womanizer," I said. "Let me explain. I was married to Claire for over 25 years. She cheated on me with her boss, and when I confronted her, she tried to eliminate me by setting my garage on fire. After the divorce, I started dating again. Claire likely talked about my abilities, and women approached me out of curiosity. I didn't chase them, I just said yes. For the past 2 years, I haven't turned down anyone who asked me out. I enjoyed their company and made them feel special. If you think that's wrong, I'm sorry." Allison studied me carefully. "So where do I fit into all of this?" she asked. "You're a beautiful woman. Like me, you've been hurt. While I sought companionship, you closed yourself off because of your ex-husband. I'm looking for someone to get to know and maybe build a life with exclusively," I said honestly. "And Claire? Didn't she want to get back together?" "Forgiveness is possible, but forgetting isn't. Without trust, there's no foundation for a relationship," I said. She nodded. "I understand. My ex wanted me to move past everything and stay, but I couldn't. My self-esteem took a hit, and I wasn't going to let him hurt me again. We're similar in that way," I said. "I spent time with women but never let them get close emotionally." Allison considered this and asked, "And now?" "I'd like to get to know you better. If there's potential, I'll commit to you fully," I replied. "Let me be upfront, I'm not doing anything until I'm married," she said firmly. I smiled. "Allison, I dated Claire in high school and waited until we were married. I'm fine with waiting." She seemed reassured. "Niels, I appreciate your honesty. I think I like you. Let's see where this goes." Over the next 4 months, we saw each other regularly, either at her place or mine. My interest in other women began to fade, though I still dated occasionally. Compliments that once boosted my ego now felt hollow. One night at dinner, Allison told me she was ready to commit. "That makes me the happiest man on earth," I said. "Honestly, the last 4 months have been meaningless when I wasn't with you. I love you." She hesitated but then said, I think I'm falling in love with you too. Please be patient with me." I promised to be patient both emotionally and physically. One day, Claire called. "Hi, Niels," she said. "Hi, Claire. How are you? What can I do for you?" I replied, cheerful. "Wow, you're in a good mood," she said, surprised. "Yes, I am." "So, what do you need?" I asked. "Why don't we have dinner? I'd like to discuss something," she suggested. "Sure, how about tonight?" I said. "That works. I'll make your favorite, roast beef with vegetables. Can you come over around 7? I agreed but felt hesitant. Later, I called Allison to let her know. "It's probably about the wedding next month," she said. At dinner, Claire eventually revealed her intent. "Niels, Mason's wedding made me think about us," she began. "There's no us, Claire," I said. "Remember how good we were together?" she asked. "We were, but the key word is were," I said gently. "I forgive you, but I can never forget what you did. I've moved on." She looked heartbroken. "Who is it?" she asked quietly. "Allison. Fiona's mother," I said. Her shoulders slumped as she realized she'd lost me. Later, I called Allison. "So, what was it?" she asked. "She wanted to get back together," I said. "I thought so." "She knows what she lost," Allison replied. "And I know what I found." "I love you, Allison," I said. "I love you too, Niels," she replied, for the first time out loud. Mason and Fiona's wedding was beautiful, and Allison and I danced the entire time. 3 months later, Allison and I had a small, private wedding surrounded by friends and family. Claire didn't attend, citing a scheduling conflict, but I knew it was too hard for her to see me move on.